Hey there, Wargamers, Stress and Air Painting today. Boom! I want to talk a little bit about alpha striking and overheating. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in today. If you are new here, please alpha strike that like and subscribe button. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you for being here to support what I do. Appreciate you having my six. Thank you for my back. Appreciate you being an awesome lance mate, star mate, whatever the case may be for you. Thank you for being here. That said, with that little intro out of the way, today's topic I want to talk about is alpha striking, overheat, the concepts of that, what are the ramifications of it, and then like the strategies and how you might employ that for the table. So a big shout out today to Craig Lighton, also Vandal, depending on what you know him as. This concept I'm going to talk about today is something that I've also talked about with him quite a bit, and it makes sense. So one of the units I'm going to bring up is one of his that he likes to use, and it's also the one he used at Northern Assault, or at least if I don't get the specific variant, you'll get the point. You can find it. It's one of the Ryokans. But I'm also going to talk about a few other considerations, and then one that I used at Southern Assault. He used his at Northern. He may have used it at Southern Assault as well, but I used this at Southern Assault here with Bobby at Bobby's event. The concepts are the same, and what you would do is the same, but I want to give him some credit because he has talked in depth with me about his Ryokan, and I think it's good to bring it up, showcase what he's used, and talk about how I use the same thing and how you might use it too. So, first and foremost, let's discuss what I mean when I say alpha strike. This may seem obvious to you, but we're going to go over it anyway. So when we're talking about alpha striking, we're talking about doing a whole lot of damage at once. Who'd have thought? That's what alpha strike means. In Classic, that is generally meaning that a unit, a mech, is firing all of its weapons at once. It is possible in Classic to alpha strike and fire all of your guns, and then your heat value allows you to dissipate all of the heat you generated. It is possible to have a build that does that, where you can alpha strike every turn. That in the video games, you might smash the button, fire all your guns. In the tabletop, you could as well. Most units, though, aren't functioning such that they can fire all their weapons and dissipate all their heat and be able to do it every turn. Usually you fire a bunch, have to shunt some heat, fire some more, shunt some heat, and you have to like do this balancing dancing act. So when I say alpha strike, let's get away from Classic, even though the end result is similar, but we're looking at it from the lens or the perspective of alpha strike, because alpha striking in alpha strike is a bit different. In alpha strike, you're generally firing all of your weapons because you have a damage value listed here. So when I'm referring to alpha striking, it's typically maxing out damage, which is going to be pulling in your OV value, your overheat, which in alpha strike is very different than Classic. You could overheat, expend a lot of weapons to generate a lot of heat. Whereas in this, you're overheating to maximize damage. In Classic, you're overheating by firing more weapons than your heat can dissipate in that turn, knowing that it's going to be that dance going up and down. So it's a little different. And in this one, the ramifications are much worse, because in Classic, you can have that heat spike. You're going to shunt some. Spike, shunt some, and you can manage where that heat is going to be and its impact on you. And there's a small heat bracket at the bottom in Classic where a little bit of heat on you is not going to hurt you. It's not great, but the negative effects don't happen until I think like 5+ heat or something. So you can shunt, or you can play with a little bit of heat generated on it. In alpha strike, even just having one heat on you is massive. So the lens that or this perspective that we're coming at this from is alpha strike today. So when I say alpha striking in alpha strike, I am referring to maximizing your damage and trying to have a net positive trade in your favor. That means in general, like, you kill a unit and your opponent doesn't, or you kill more units than your opponent does, or you do more damage, so that the trade-off for alpha striking is such that you're getting ahead in the game in some way. So conceptually speaking, there's a few things we need to understand in alpha strike in regards to how the game functions and what alpha striking and overheating is going to do for you. So that is going to have us starting off by talking about stacking mods. So bear with me. For those of you who are new, this may be good. For those of you who are vets, this may be redundant. Skip ahead if you want, or just listen to me ramble. So in Alpha Strike and like Classic, you're going to start with your gunnery skill, or in Alpha Strike, your skill level, so skill. Okay, the average for that is going to be a 4. Okay, then you're going to be looking at your range. So your range mod, we should call it RM. Which is going to be 0 for short, 2 for medium, 4 for long. Then you're going to be adding in your opponent's TMM, target movement modifier. Did they move? Are they hard to hit? On average, you're probably looking at a 2. A lot of the inner sphere stuff, their heavies, if you're facing a lot of heavies, is going to be a +1 mod. Their mediums, which I feel is the kind of bread and butter for inner sphere, is generally a +2. And then their lights, 3s and 4s. You're going to see a lot of probably medium skew in for the inner sphere because their heavies aren't quite as efficient, whereas the clanners, their heavies are very efficient, albeit expensive, but they average a 2 TMM on average, and then their mediums don't get any worse generally. So when you start thinking about what you're going to see on the tabletop, yes, you could see a 4 TMM, yes, you could see a 0, you could see 1s because of assaults, but the like median area, actually, is it median, right? Median, mode, mean, whatever, somewhere in the middle or the average, you're probably going to see a lot of somewhere around a +2. So we're just going to call it +2 for TMM for the math. Then, if you're playing as a competitive player, probably more often than not, you're playing on a table with terrain features, and you're going to be looking at obscurity or woods. So sometimes you could be obscured and firing through woods, which would be a net +2 mod. We're just going to say misc mod, and we'll call it misc mod, and we're just going to say +1. Because you could have +2, but if you don't have obscurity, where your mech is like partial cover, if you don't have that, you're probably looking for trees. If you found trees, you might have partial cover. You could have both, but let's just assume you have one or the other. So when you're building your 2-hit roll, you're going to start with your skill, so 4, right? And then you're going to be looking at a 2, 3, or 0, 2, or 4 for your range. In Alpha Strike, the most optimum range you're going to be firing at is most frequently medium. Not a lot of long range because most Alpha Strike games, at least from what I run, what I play in, the events that I see, are typically played somewhere about, say, 4x4. Yes, the game book says 4x6 is the standard. Everything I see is a 4x4. I run by 4x4. So Assault runs 4x4. Other events I see are 4x4. I think that is because the number of units you're fielding makes more sense on a 4x4 for a speedy game, whereas Warhammer 40k kind of needs that larger game board. If you're playing Alpha Strike with 250 to 350 points on a 4x6, rather, you end up with, like, the units are so far spread out and there's just so much of a distance between them, you're not doing as much. I feel like on that smaller game board, the games are faster, and they're getting you into the action, playing objectives. I do think there's a place for a 4x6, slight side tangent. I think that is going to mean different objectives and missions and probably a higher model count or higher point total. So, again, this perspective is from what I see, what I run, and what I witness and play in, which means that the average board that I expect most of you are probably going to see is a 4. Your mileage may vary. Take that as you will. So we're going to go with medium range mod, so 2. TMM average, you're firing at a 2. Miscellaneous mod, a +1 for cover or obscurity, which means on average for your unit to hit, you are looking at 9s. Okay. If you get that to short range, you're looking at a 7. If you get it at long range, you're looking at an 11. And the whole point of me going through this right here is that you're stacking mods. So if you want to survive, you need to move. Make sure you're moving, getting your movement mod, TMM. If you don't move, you're sitting target, you're easy to hit. All right, if you don't move, you're basically dead. And then you're looking for cover. So each layer that you add is huge. When an average dice roll on a pair of d6 is like 6.57, if you're getting this average above 7, or assuming the number they need above 7, they need to roll above average to hit. It decreases their odds of hitting. The lower this number is to hit, the higher their odds of hitting, which is what you want, but you want your opponent's number high, which is also why your skill level is so important. Even just having a 3 is going to knock this down to an 8, which is substantial. 2 is even better. But point of this area here is to explain that you're stacking mods. So now looking at this, what you would need in an ideal situation with an average gunnery skill of 4, which is your basic unit, shooting at something with an average TMM that you're probably going to see of a 2 against something at medium range, against something with cover or trees, you're needing a 9. What happens when you use overheat? And this is where things get crazy, is that every other turn with overheating, you are trading off your combat effectiveness. So in this particular scenario, you need 9s to hit. Let's say we're using our Jade Hawk here. We can spike that to having 8 damage, needing 9s to hit. In this case, you would need 8s to hit, which is a little bit of above average roll. Not too bad. But what does that mean for future turns, right? For every point of heat, you're going to be treating your gunnery skill as +1, so it gets 1 worse per heat. Your movement is reduced by 2, so -2 MV. And for every 2 points of heat, you're -1 TMM. Whoops, and we'll say 2 for heat. All right. So if you were to overheat, in this case with the Jade Hawk for 2, so you're heating for 8 damage, the next turn he's going to have 2 heat on him, which means his gunnery skill, in this case, is a 3, is going to be treated as a 5 now, which would make the to hit a 10 instead of 8s. I should have just used the skill of a 3 to make the math work, but let's just assume that, make it easy, let's assume this Jade Hawk's a skill 4, right? He overheats for 2, that means the next turn he goes to shoot, he's skill 6. Which means his to hit mods all held standard are going to be 10 because it's +2 higher, right? But if he shoots, he's not going to be able to shunt his heat. If you make a ranged attack, you can't shunt heat. You can move, do everything that you want, right? And in this case, if he overheated for 2, his movement would be -4, which is huge, right? It's substantial, and -1 TMM, so it's pretty big deal. So when you are approaching alpha striking, maximizing damage with heat, conceptually you need to understand, for the basic game, you're stacking mods, either in your favor or trying to mitigate those mods to be in your favor for hitting, or use those mods to be in your favor for defense, right? With overheating, you are trying to increase your damage output when you've got optimum mods, optimum range, things that you want, in a situation where you think that you can trade typically early to get ahead, whether it's on material or dishing out damage, whatever the case may be. You're trading your combat effectiveness on the subsequent turn to increase your combat effectiveness on this turn. So in this case, for the Jade Hawk, at medium range, I could spike for 8 damage. I'm giving up probably 6 damage for the following turn. But if that spike of 33% increase, because it's 6 damage, 2 more, so it's 33% more, for 1 turn, if that extra 33% damage nets me a kill on a unit, I'm okay not firing with this in the next turn. Shunt his heat, then come back on turn 3. Fire again. If I need to overheat, cool. If it nets me a unit, I'm okay not firing at that second turn. So when you are overheating in alpha striking, make sure it's worth it, because you need to understand that not only have you been stacking mods, you want to make sure that the things that you're stacking mods with can fire and use them, right? So if you overheat, generally turn A, you're firing, turn B, you're hiding to shunt heat, turn C, you're firing, turn D, you're hiding to shunt heat, unless you don't need to overheat, at which point it's like overheat and alpha strike early, shunt heat to get combat effectiveness increased, come back in, fire some more, overheat when necessary. So think of it as hit and run. You move forward, you overheat and you shoot. Next turn you hide if necessary. So one of the things to remember here to drive home is the negative implications of this. So let's get away from the Jade Hawk, because he's got a concept I want to talk about on him later. Let's see if I got another unit here with OV that doesn't have jump. And you're killing me, Smalls. All of them have jump. So my cards at hand aren't going to be particularly helpful. This Cataphract does not have OV, but we're going to assume he does for easy math here, or for the sake of argument. So, assuming he has jump. Okay, here we go. Assuming this guy had overheat, let's say overheat of 3, right? And skill 4. So he goes to shoot, he overheats for 3, he's got 6 damage. So he fires and does whatever. The next turn he's got 3 heat on him. What does that mean for his base stat line? Alright, so he's skill 4. Alright, so looking at 4, it's his base. His movement is 8. His TMM is 1. He's got 3 heat on him now. So what does that mean? If you guys remember the things that I discussed above for what mods happen per heat. I'll give you guys a second to think about it. Alright, so if he's got 3 heat on him, that means his gunnery skill is going to be +3. 1 point per heat. He's skill 7 on the next turn. His movement is reduced by 2 MV per heat. -6 move. He's got 2 move next turn. And for every 2 points of heat, you're -1 TMM. So he's -1 TMM, 0 TMM for the next turn. His combat effectiveness is absolutely trash. This means if this guy, let's say he did have OV3, that's the example we're giving. Conceptually, you want to get ahead, deal some damage, get away and hide. Can you guys consider, and Craig, if you're listening to this, you're going to type away because you know, but for everyone else, do you know what the problem is with units like this, or anything that has something similar stat-wise? I'll give you a moment to think about it. And perhaps you are saying his TMM is 0 now, that sucks. That would also be a point. Perhaps more importantly, perhaps you are considering that, hey, if he really needs to shoot his skill 7 now, he can't hit anything. Also a good point. The most important point to take away from this is that this guy's MV raw standard is an 8. So when you overheat, for every point, you're losing 25% of your move. If he overheated for 3, again, let's assume he had 3, he is dropping down to a 2-inch move. Can you honestly, or do you think you can honestly get a mech out of cover into position to fire and then back into cover with 2 inches? Or enough away where your opponent can't finagle around to shoot at them with these negative mods. So a thing to consider when you overheat, especially if it's a unit with lower move, low TMM, not a very good skill, and a high OV value, can you leverage that OV and get away and not get killed? So if turn 1 you're able to leverage that overheat, alpha strike someone to take them off the table, only for turn 2 for that trade in material to come back around, so you're basically even again, the overheat probably wasn't worth it. Because you just traded positioning. Like turn 1 you got ahead a little bit, turn 2 you're back to standard, or your opponent's ahead because now you've lost your pawn or one of your damage dealers. In theory, you want to move forward, alpha strike, deal damage, and be able to retreat and hide. Think of it as reloading. Step out to fire from a position of cover, move back into cover, safety, concealment, whatever, to maximize your mods if that's what you have to do with it, if it's trees, or get yourself completely out of line of sight. Units with at least an MV value of 12 is great. So if this guy had skill or overheat 3 and 12 move, he's only sacrificing half of his move versus 75%. 6 inches goes a hell of a lot farther than 2, gives you a lot more flexibility with movement. And that particular example leads into what Craig is running with his Ryokan, and let me bring this up here on my end. So we have the Stormcrow B. I'm not sure if this is specifically the variant that he is running. I'm going to make a note here so I know to bring up the Stormcrow B. Stormcrow B. So I know to bring that up on the screen for you guys. Hopefully I remember. So this guy's coming in at 39 points, skill 4. He's probably running his skill 3 at least. He's got 440 for damage, TMM of 2, which is much better than this guy here. 12 movement, OV 3. So with the Stormcrow, let's get his stats down. Let's say that Craig is running him at skill 2, which he's probably running as a 2 or 3. A 2 is really if he wants to leverage that damage early. So let's say skill 2, which is a really good example. His movement is 12. His TMM is 2. He has OV of 3. So his standard mods for hitting are going to be 2. Firing at medium range is going to be should be 2. So 4. Firing at an average TMM of 2 is going to be 6. And if they have cover, concealment, obscurity, looking for 7. So average roll of a 7, right? He starts out with 4 damage. Now he's going to overheat for 7. So he's got 3 overheats, going to go for 7 damage. So in the turn 2, let's say turn 1 he's got that alpha strike. Turn 2, he's sitting on 3 heat. So his skill is going to be plus 3, so 5. Okay. He's going to be at minus 6 move, so 2 per heat, so minus 6. He's at a 6 MV. And for every 2 points of heat, he's minus 1 TMM. So he's only got 3 heat on him, so it is net only minus 1 TMM. So he's still got plus 1 TMM. So in a pinch, if he absolutely needed to shoot again, his skill 5 is not very good, but still manageable if necessary. You might be able to unleash a volley if he thinks he's going to go down. But the big deal is he's still got 6 move. He could use that 12 to move into position to fire, use that 6 to get out. So if you're considering moving your unit to get into position to shoot, make sure you consider where he's going to go on the turn to follow up. The other thing that you could do in this particular case, you could, let's say you overheat for 2 instead. So then on the following turn, he's only sitting at a 4 skill, which is back to average, right? So you could use that when you'd have an 8 move left. So you can alpha strike, not maximum, so 2 points of damage, and then alpha strike for another 2, and then move away. So you have a little bit of flexibility, but the big thing to take away from the Stormcrow B here is that 12 move, because no matter what he's doing with his heat, he's always got a 6-inch move, which gets him away, which is super helpful, super helpful. The other thing to consider when we're talking about alpha striking, and the Stormcrow is a really good example, raw as standard stats. We're not going to go with skill 2 anymore. We'll say this Ryokan B is a skill 4. His base cost is 39, right? And his maximum damage output every other turn essentially is a 7. You could alpha strike 2 turns in a row, shut down, and then on turn 4 you start back up, or at the end of turn 4 3 you start up. Turn 4 you start firing again. You could do that, but every other turn is 7. So we're going to look at the Stormcrow K. So this was the B. The K is 47 points. He's 6 points of damage raw, no alpha strike, right? So for 8 points less, you could bring in this guy, who does only have a 4 raw damage, okay? but you shaved 8 points. That 8 points might be the difference between a skill 4 6 damage or a skill 3 4 damage that can alpha strike every other turn for 7. All right, so you're giving up 33% of this damage to go down to 4, but you're net positive every other turn with alpha striking if necessary, and you saved points. If you do this across multiple units to bring units with OV, their damage values are usually less raw, but they can spike, so you can alpha strike and try and trade. But they're generally cheaper than units that have raw damage every turn who don't have to manage their heat. They don't have to consider the ramifications of that. So conceptually speaking, we've talked about stacking mods in your favor, trying to mitigate mods to take away your opponent's favorable outcomes, and what you would do alpha striking for trading material. But when you're considering prepping units for alpha strike and how you would use them, there's also a list building element. So with units like this, if you're looking for pure damage output, if you start considering units with OV for an alpha strike style of gameplay, it adds up. So in this case, 8 points is only 8 points. But let's say this crosses 3 units and you've saved 8 points across 3 different units. That 8 points is 24 points now. 24 points is basically another light mech, right? So if you start to consider making a 300, 350 point list, and let's say a third of your list, a quarter of your list, does something like this, that almost pays for a whole mech in and of itself with the savings, and also gives you an every other turn kind of spike damage. And the benefit of that, again, is to strike early, trade with that alpha strike, and then every other turn mitigate the damage you're taking while you prepare for another alpha strike. And you're hopefully taking off a piece a turn, piece every other turn, and mitigating damage you're taking in return. You can't hit, or you can't shoot what you can't see. So if you get in position to alpha strike, shoot, back away into obscurity and be hidden, pop out again, make your opponent dig you out like a tick. So the Stormcrow B is a really good example of that. It's got that 12 move raw, which helps mitigate the heat. We've seen the Stormcrow K, which has raw 6 damage, and I've shown you the example of the difference in point value. So I want to bring up another unit type to give you guys some considerations. We have the Shadowcat D. Shadowcat D. So this guy comes in with 4 medium range damage, 2 overheat, and 12 J. Okay, so he can basically add 50% more damage when he alpha strikes. His jump jets are weak. That's something good to consider. This is a unit I want to bring up along with a few others, so I can give you my take on what I like to do with this, which is a little bit different from Lighten's, but still helpful. So he's got a 12J, 16 move. All right. So we've got that Shadowcat up here, and we have got our Black Hawk. I'm just going to put Nova because it's his other name. It's easier, Nova H. He comes in at 6 damage medium, 4 overheat, which is absolute nutters, 10J. And then we have got the Black Hawk. I think this is an I. Yeah, so Nova I. And he has got a 5 damage, 2 OV, 10J. This one is 42 points, and this one is 45. It's a 3-point difference. And the final example that I want to use, which we've already got up here, is the Jade Hawk 3. He comes in at 6 damage, 2 overheats, 10J, and he is 53 points. He's a little bit more because he's got more HP, and I actually have his card printed out right here. Whoops, knocking over stuff. So I've got him because I used them, and this is a good example. So I wanted to dig through and find some examples for you guys. If you don't have a Ryokan, you don't have a Jade Hawk, it's not super easy to sift through the master unit list to find units with specific number of OV and movement, so you kind of have to go through and find what you find. These are just a few examples. Unfortunately, they're kind of clan mechs. The Jade Hawk is an outlier in the Dark Age because it kind of goes for a variety of factions, but same kind of concept. It's an advanced era. Finding some inner sphere tech that does this, I'm sure it's out there. I rely on you, or will rely on you guys in the comments to throw out some options for me there. But I want to talk about these because they're options that you may have and give you similar concepts. So Shadowcat D that we just spoke about, 12J, 16 move, 4 raw damage, 2 overheat. So it can add 50% more damage when it overheats. You want to take a moment and think about why this is one of the units I brought up. What makes this useful? If your thoughts were that the J in movement are here, you would be correct. So this guy gives you maximum versatility. Yes, it has weak jump jets, but one of the concepts that we haven't got to with alpha striking and heat in particular is how it impacts different movement types, and specifically jump. So if you were to overheat with your Shadowcat in the next subsequent turn, it's going to be having 2 heat on it, so it's going to be -4 move, right? And it's going to be -1 TMM. One of the ways you can mitigate that TMM is by jumping. So it's -1 TMM, but a unit with jump generally gets +1, so that's a net 0. This guy unfortunately has weak jump jets, so the jump isn't going to get it around the negative. But what other benefits does it have? So let's look over the 16 move first. If you are -4 movement, because you have 2 heat on you, he's still got a net 12 move. He can get wherever the hell he wants to go, within reason. I mean, if you're playing on a 4x4 and you have a 12-inch move, that's a 24-inch, basically, radius, or a diameter, rather, because it's 12 one way, 12 the other. Thinking of a circle, so here's your center, 12 this way, 12 that way. If you're in the center of the table, you can go a variety of places, because it's only 4 feet wide. So you've got half the table movement, sort of, if you start thinking that way. So he's got 12-inch move. He can go wherever you want. He's got the 12J. The thing with the jumps that's really interesting is that the heat reduces standard MV. It doesn't reduce J. So this guy you could overheat on turn 1, throw 2 heat on him, and then on turn 2 you're sitting at +2 to your skill, -4 to your standard MV, but not your jump, and you're still in a position to overheat again. You could overheat for 1, so you're sitting on 3 net heat. 4 will shut you down. So if you're in a position where you think you can get somewhere and shoot and not be shot at, you can overheat again, then hide. Or if you're worried you're going to take damage with him, you can literally move somewhere if you need to, or jump over terrain. So utilize that jump, because it doesn't reduce. And isn't reduced by heat. The thing with the Jade to consider, again, he has this specific example has weak jump jets. If they don't have weak jump jets, it's great, because you're -1 TMM for each 2 heat you have. So being able to jump helps mitigate that penalty. You don't get a net positive like you would normally from jumping, but at least it negates the raw penalty. With this particular guy, it's nice being able to at least move, because if you do jump, you're minus the 1 TMM from the heat, or the 2 heat, then you're not getting the +1 from the jump, because he's got weak. So you're not getting much of a benefit. But in this particular case, you could just do a standard move. So if you have a 16 move in heat, you're in good shape. But this helps us break into the conversation about jump jets and concepts. Even better if you have strong jump jets. So when we come down here to look at the Nova H and I, what are some benefits here? What are you guys seeing, and what are some themes that you're noticing? If you noticed that this one for 3 points more does 1 point more damage and has double overheat and only costs 3, that would be one of the first things I would notice. 6 damage to 5 damage difference isn't huge. It's only 1 point of damage. So if that was the only thing we're considering, you might shave the 1 point of damage to save 3 points, because over multiple units doing this, you might be able to bring in a whole new unit. But when you're looking at the double overheat value, holy crap, that's massive. Now, this is a last-ditch overheat, because that'll shut you down. That is a pure and utter standard alpha strike. You shut yourself down and maximum kill everything type moment, but only 3 points more to have this. They both have 10J. So if this guy overheats for 2, he's technically at -4 TMM, or excuse me, -4 movement, -1 TMM, +2 skill. But he's got 10J. Got that 10J, so he's still able to come out, fire, jump away, right? Which is really, really useful, and being able to mitigate some of the lack of TMM with his jump. The Nova H here can overheat for 3, so -6 move, but he's got 10J, so he's still got a standard 10J, and he gets to mitigate the -1 TMM from the overheat with the jump. So this guy can spike for 10 damage, this guy can spike for 7, make these like skill 3, and you're in good shape. The really nice thing with these is that you can move forward, standard move 10, so walking, and then you can jump away. Because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're jumping, taking the negative to hit, and trying to overheat. Because that's just going to make it really hard for you to leverage that damage. So you want to do a standard move, shoot, overheat, jump away. With the Nova in particular, he has the option to fire everything, max out damage, and try to kill something knowing he's going to shut down. Or if he's about to die, he can max out his damage anyway, because why not overheat if you're going to go down? So these are 2 really good units to consider. They don't have the 12 move, but it is straight jump, which is really nice. And I bet most of you guys have these, because it was a pretty common unit to get a hold of with the clan invasion. Now, generally, conceptually, if I was aiming for an overheat unit to do an alpha strike, I would want to have OV3 because I would want to maximize the damage and I want jump jets so that I can jump away. That's not always something at your disposal, but it is what it is. Now, the Jade Hawk that I have here, Team M2, 10J, skill 3, so I'm helping leverage his overheat with the skill 3, and it helps mitigate some of the jump penalty. So he's going to be able to overheat to push his damage to an 8, and then I can jump away. Walk back out every other turn, shoot, jump away. Same concept. So 2 heat is going to -1 for his TMM. Still got TMM of 1. I can jump, bring me back to TMM of 2. And if he's overheated, he would be at -4 move. He could still walk 6 or jump 10. Probably going to jump 10 to maximize the movement. And then follow, or every other turn, pop back out. This is a unit that I really like. It's versatile. It's very simple. It's got a decent amount of HP. Not lots of abilities you have to worry about in a really good tanky unit. The flip side to that is he is pretty expensive. So this guy here for 5 damage, 2 overheat, which isn't far off. This guy deals 8 with his overheat versus 7 here. This guy comes in at raw. He is 22 points cheaper, but this guy is skill 3. And then this guy coming in at 45 is still almost 20 points cheaper, 19. Was that, yeah, 19 points cheaper? Yeah, because 20 points would be 44. Again, this is considering skill 4, but this guy is pumping out, can basically do the same amount of damage as the Jade Hawk. He has a 10J, he's got to have the 2 TMM, his HP is probably a little bit less, but the Nova can do similar things. So finding units like this that can do a variety of Alpha Strike things is good, and hopefully there's some stuff for the inner sphere that you guys might find. And I would love for you guys to chime up in the comments and let me know what it is that you have found. So in closing, what are some core concepts and strategies we've got here? So first of all, as we recap, stacking mods. That's going to be your range and your TMM. And we'll go with cover. So trees. Actually, one thing to mention is also water. This is really easy to miss, but water is considered standard water and Alpha Strike, unless defined, is considered as depth 1. That's enough to obscure a mech. So if a mech is standing in water, they get a +1 for obscurity as well. So +1. So this will be plus question mark, whatever you got, and then range is 0, 2, or 4, and then your standard skill. So remember, if you're trying to survive, use your mods here, stack those. Each extra layer is going to add to your survivability. If you are trying to shoot at somebody, what mods can you remove? So can you get into closer range? Can you mitigate negatives, which you would be getting by getting into short range anyway? But specifically, do you need to jump? Question mark. Because if you're jumping, that is adding a penalty to your to hit. Do you need to do that? So generally, jumping away is good. Jumping, planning to shoot is situational. So that is a mod that you have full control over when your opponent doesn't, or when you can't stop your opponent from doing these things. Okay. The other concepts, once we've got these stacking mods, Alpha Strike. What do we mean? So Alpha Striking is early trades. Getting ahead. I don't know why I have a smiley face, because if you're getting ahead against somebody, then they're probably not happy, but maybe you are. So then I guess that explains the smiley face. So Alpha Strike, early trades, get ahead. Thinking like chess, trading material. Stepping forward, make an Alpha Strike, leveraging all your damage. That Alpha Strike is hopefully helping you push over the edge. If you Alpha Strike and you don't kill a unit, or you don't think you can kill a unit, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Because you're making your unit, or you're reducing, or you're trading combat effectiveness on a future turn to increase percentage-wise of your combat effectiveness this turn. So if you want to Alpha Strike something, ask yourself, can I kill it this turn if I roll reasonable? If I need to spike it, is this Alpha Strike going to win me the game? And if I fail it, I lose, but this is my last-ditch effort, at which point you have to consider if that's worth it. If it's turn 1 and you have to spike it, knowing that turn 2 your combat effectiveness is going to be gone, maybe it's worth considering doing standard shooting on turn 1, then turn 2 stepping up to Alpha Strike and then jump away on turn 3, and then start your rotation. So when you start your every other turn kind of Alpha Strike, hide to reload, or shunt heat type endeavors, you have to consider what you're gaining from that. So if you're not going to actually clear a unit off the table, then you're not trading material in your favor. Wait and reduce your combat effectiveness when it is optimal for you. And then what kind of movement type do you have? So do you have a standard move or J? And if you are overheating and going for the Alpha Strike, know your limitations. What can you do? Can you get away and hide? And that is going to dictate how much of your heat you might want to use and where you're going to position in an ideal situation. You pick units with enough movement that they can at least give you some modicum of mobility even when they're heated up. And if they have J, you're good to go. Just remember where combat-wise, tactics and strategies, where you position your units, knowing where that they have the Alpha Strike capability. Make sure you plan that out. Don't put them out in the open where if they Alpha Strike, they're sitting ducks and can't get away. That's pointless. You didn't trade material. You traded for a turn, and then you lost a unit. So make sure if you are going to do this, you position in such a way that you can come in for the Alpha, and then you can position yourself in such a way that you can reload or shunt heat, however you want to view it, and make your opponent have to work really hard to get to you. And if they're really trying to dig you out because they want to benefit from your lower TMM or your lack of survivability or your combat effectiveness, make sure your other units can punish them for that. So positioning is also going to be key. And to that end, the final concept is list building. List points. What do we mean? So, as I had mentioned before, units that have Alpha Strike, can Alpha Strike with their OV value, generally end up being cheaper than units that have a similar damage value or more, because those units can fire every turn without the penalty. So they don't have to trade combat effectiveness on a future turn by trying to spike damage this turn. Ergo, they cost more because they're more effective every turn of the game. Whereas units with Alpha Strike, overheat or potential for Alpha Striking, those units are generally a little bit cheaper relative to units with similar damage. Because they can't leverage that same level of damage every turn, they will eventually shut down. They're not going to hit as easy. They can't move as far. They can't, or their TMMs are lower, so they're just going to end up dying. So they can't maintain that level of damage like a unit with a standard. So when you are doing your list building, bring some units that you've planned ahead who can effectively overheat, because there are some units that overheating is detrimental to them. You do it as a last ditch effort, and that's okay to have. Then there are units like these that we discussed that have the movement or the jump capabilities to make sure you can leverage the heat in a non-do-or-die situation, because you've planned for that, and because they're cheaper, they shave you points for your list building. Those points add up, which means more combined arms units, maybe more light units, which are kind of the dagger totem pawns for Alpha Strike, which are super important. If you don't have a bunch of lights, you should start getting those, because they're the easiest piece to fit in and one of the most annoying to fight against. So that is the concepts, the strategies, and what I think is important to consider when you approach Alpha Strike, Battletech Alpha Strike, and when you're trying to Alpha Strike with overheat values in Alpha Strike. I think this covers a wide range of everything. So stack your mods. What mods can you remove? How can you position yourself to not be taken out? Can you get an early trade to get yourself ahead on material and help skew the game in your favor? Did you plan properly with your movement types on your units that you want to leverage this Alpha Strike capability with? And did you utilize the points you saved by bringing these types of units to your advantage with your list building? That said, folks, I wanted to tackle this topic months ago and have not been able to. Big shout out to Craig Vandal Lighton for talking to me about his Ryokan when he was building his lists for the events that he goes to. I think the concept is solid. His unit doesn't use jump, but again, it's got the 12 move, OV3, still gives him a net 6 move to utilize for himself. And then units with jump, which is what I like, allows maximum flexibility for positioning because you can jump over stuff. So again, big shout out to him. Hope this concept helps you guys. If it did, sound off in the comments below. If you think we're full of shit, sound off in the comments below. If you're a dirty mercenary or awesome Inner Sphere player, which are kind of one and the same, right? Sound off in the comments below and let me know if there's some units that adhere to this that you like, and share with me and share with the community, because again, sifting through the master unit list is not the easiest thing to do when you're looking for specific movement values and specific OV values. So if there are units that are your go-tos, I'd love to know what you're using, and it will benefit me as well as anyone who's watching this video. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and as always, keep rolling your dice, keep painting your models, and I will catch you guys in the next video. you made it this far, you're probably a viewer that already hits that like button when you see a video come up. You're probably already a subscriber, and you probably jump into the comments down below to help support the channel, to help support that algorithm. But if you're looking for some other ways to help support the channel too, make sure you check the description down below. Maybe you want to pick up some paints from Monument Hobbies. That's my paint of choice. The Pro Acrylic line is chef's kiss, good stuff. Maybe you want to check out some of the offerings from Death Row Designs, where I work in my day job. We got plenty of 3D printed products, as well as MDF terrain, some of the stuff that I have designed myself and we play with here on the channel. And if you're looking to bolster your Battletech ranks, miniatures, and offerings, make sure you check out Bobby from Fortress Miniatures and Games. He's one of the main supporters of the channel as well, and supporting any of these companies helps support what I do and helps to ensure that I can continue to bring content to all of you. If you want to become a super supporter, I highly recommend you guys check out the Patreon. You guys give that extra little edge to help push more content out, and I really do appreciate that. And my ultimate goal on the channel is to continue to be able to not only put out the content we have now, but to get to a point where you can put out more content later, whether that be battle reports or painting tutorials or just more rambles, anything at all. I'd like to be doing more content for you. This is something that I enjoy. I like being able to cast a light into the darkness to bring a little bit of hobby positivity to all of you and make you feel good, and also enjoy playing games myself. As we do the final sign off here though, I do want to go ahead and switch on over and do the scroll of awesome to showcase all the Patreon supporters, the super supporters of the channel, to give them some recognition for helping support what I do. Thank you guys so much, and I will catch you guys next time.